The value that I think leaders most need during these times that are particularly turbulent with so much going on and so much complexity. The leaders today are facing challenges that are so different from leaders 50 years ago, where they were dealing with just a few suppliers, a few distributors, and the supply chains were much more stable. Now you're talking about the implications not only of the particular business, but of their suppliers, of their distributors, and the decisions being made by the people in which they're aligning with. And so there's a greater sense of responsibility. And I believe that the biggest thing that the leaders need is an enacted sense of compassion. So in some ways I'm sort of like hybriding two values, I guess, but I can do that, sort of co-opt two concepts. But for me, it first starts with that heart. It's that ability to recognize that there are big issues going on the planet that will affect our children, our children's children, as well as the people within our communities, our nations. And then as we're more and more connected around the globe, recognizing that there are people around the globe that have families, that have cares, that have values, and having a heart connection, caring for them. But having that heart feeling isn't enough. It's not enough to sit and to reflect and feel the sadness, feel the sense of connection. It's about taking action and finding out what can you do in the context of your life. It's so easy to become overwhelmed because we can go in so many different directions and we can feel responsible for things that are far beyond our control. But when we begin to say, what can I do within the context of my life based on this real deep feeling of compassion, recognizing where we connect, where we feel compassion, and taking action on that, I think is the most critical next step for leaders and the most critical value. Mm. I see that there's often a disconnect between espoused values and the lived values, and often there's a fear around the values that are being met or that people are trying to meet. So, for example, if a company or an individual is really struggling with financial stability, that's something that can be looked on as a weakness. In our society, that can be looked on as a weakness. So it's something that often will remain hidden from the talked about agenda. And instead, you might espouse that you really believe in collaboration, whereas what you're really needing to do is to get your core business aligned and to be solid in that. And so there's a disconnect. And when that disconnect occurs and it's not talked about, it's not transparent, then people start to see a lack of integrity around the way that you're showing up in the world. You may say that you want to collaborate, and then if a bigger player comes into the picture and you're collaborating with some organizations, you may make choices in order to align with the larger organization and actually disregard the people that you're collaborating with. And it's coming out of that need to create a higher level of stability, financial stability, security, and so people may question, are you really focused on collaboration? Are you really functioning from that value? And so what I would say is, my own belief is that leaders need to learn how to become more vulnerable and learn to see the reality as it is and being willing to hear what the reality is for people who work with them. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to enter into that field of unknown and to hear things that you might not want to hear. And so it's also important that leaders set up safe spaces where they're not publicly exposed, but where they can actually hear the hard answers and they can get the hard input and then move forward and say, okay, here are the values that I have and that I feel that we need. Because one of the things that came up today is this idea of, our values fixed? Do we have these core set of values that we continue to use as our touchstones to navigate through life and all of the complexity of decisions? Or do we adjust our values or adjust the values of the organization based on the external influences and things that come up? And I believe it's both and. It's both holding on to some core values, but then it's adapting based on what's needed. Because as humans, we have this lexicon of values. We understand what it means to need basic security and stability, to need a roof over our heads or food to feed our children. But we might not be functioning from that place day to day if we actually have those needs met. And likewise, we may be coming from a place of deep compassion, even when we need to have those basic needs met. So I believe that there are these core values that we take wherever we go, and then if financial stability is something that's unstable, or say it's something around efficiencies, or there's been an overdevelopment of hierarchy in our organization, and that becomes a big issue, then learning how to work more collaboratively might help to balance that overemphasis on hierarchy or bureaucracy. And so we may bring in a different value. Maybe teamwork might come in as a value to address issues around hierarchy or bureaucracy and to create balance in the system. I heard a story today about Royal Road students, and it's that Royal Road students tend to have a sense of responsibility for the world around them. And I heard a story about some projects that students have gotten involved with as far as, I'm trying to remember the exact story, but it was something to do with giving back in society. Actually, there were 3 stories. And so my sense is that there's something inherent in why students are attracted to Royal Roads and part of their own individual sense of right and wrong in the world that they continue to pursue. And so what I would say is staying true to that and having a sense of your core values and having a sense of what your vision is. And of course, it's going to adapt and change in different ways, but being able to use that as a guiding map as you move forward, because life can take us into so many different scenarios, so many different situations, but it's when we stay self-connected that we're actually able to create coherence. And when we create coherence as leaders and as individuals, it attracts other people. It builds trust. They know what to expect out of you. And so the more that we can do the deep inquiry, the more we can get clear on what is actually connecting with us. And listening, because it's not the same for all of us, but listening to what's important, sharing it with other people, and finding ways that we can act in coherence with that in the world. You'll find strength, you'll find people who will follow you, and that great things will happen around it. Yeah.